Hey everybody, it's Steve from Scram Speed here again. This time we're taking a little break from the LS Swap MSD 6014 carb videos to talk about carburetors in general, or more specifically, the Chinese carburetors that have been infesting eBay and a bunch of other places, purporting to be the same thing as a name brand carburetor, only for hundreds of dollars less. A lot of people are being fooled by this, so I wanted to make a video so you could see what it was all about. A lot of people assume this is like the same thing as, in the LS world, Holley went over to China and cast their oil pans and intake manifolds, and the Chinese have recently taken to stealing their design, basically, and then selling that same part over here for hundreds less. People see these cheap carburetors, they superficially look similar to the actual carburetor, and so they wonder, are they getting the same thing? We got three questions to answer today. The first is it really the same carburetor? The second being, a carburetor is more complicated than an intake manifold, which is just a cast piece, or an oil pan, which is just a cast piece. Does the complexity of the carburetor affect the ability for the copycats to do a monkey see, monkey do, and give you a product that works? And third would be, okay, whether it works, whatever, is it a good carburetor for my project that I'm working on or not? Let's compare them. I have the Brawler carb and the Chinese carb here. First, it's definitely not the same carburetor, and you can see that from basically looking at it. Compare the base plate, obviously different. The bowls are also different. The Chinese carbs are an old Holley design from when you used a flathead screwdriver to take the bowl screws out, like in the 80s. All modern carburetors use a 5/16 socket or nut driver, and the Chinese use these bolts much like the modern carburetors, but the carburetor bowl is not machined sufficiently to account for that. The small parts such as cams and choke parts are different, easily discernible by the yellow instead of the pink. The bleeds visible from the top here are not the same as Holley, and spoiler, the jets and such are not the same as Holley either. We'll get to that. Is it the same carburetor? And the answer is no. Even though this carburetor is marketed under the same part number as this carburetor on eBay and the like, it is not the same carburetor. Question number two, is this effective as a carburetor? Well, as I'm sure you can probably imagine, the racing scene in China is not that exciting. There's probably no one in the factory who made this carburetor who's ever actually seen a V8 in person, and they definitely don't drag race, they definitely don't build hot rod engines. And it's pretty obvious when you start looking closer at this carburetor. Look at the bowl screws. They hammer these in as tight as they can go. You can see that they squish the crap out of these little plastic gaskets. My prediction is that these aren't going to seal, and even if they do, they won't after you take the bowls off even one time. The Chinese don't know that this is a part that's going to have to be removed again and again. If you're smart, you're probably doing that before you ever even put fuel in the carburetor. The Chinese don't know that you're going to be changing jets if you're serious, and you'll be removing these screws pretty often. They apparently think this is some kind of a structural component like a cylinder head, and they seem to be torqued about as tight as a cylinder head. There are a couple of other serious gotchas here. Look at this. The choke is just flopping around. It does nothing as it comes. My favorite is the fittings they give you for the fuel line. These are intended to go in the inverted flare bowl inserts, but check it out. These don't even have a flare. What's up with that? That's not going to work. They don't even have the first clue. By the way, if you want an awesome fuel line solution for your Holley that doesn't leak and makes the carburetor way easy to work on, check out our other videos. We've got the perfect solution. I'll include a link in the description as well. I don't know if they don't have Loctite in China, but there doesn't appear to be any on these throttle blades, which could send some screws through your engine. Did you save enough money on this carburetor to rebuild your engine? Probably not. What size is this carb really? They advertise the same carburetor as a 650, a 750, and an 850 using Holley and Brawler part numbers. It is in all three. Comparatively to even a cheap Holley Brawler, this is a very low quality part, obviously slapped together by people who have no understanding of how it functions or how it is supposed to be used. So, the question, is it going to work as a carburetor? I would say, as it comes in the box, absolutely not. So that leads into the third question, which is this going to be a good carburetor for your project? We'll go over some basics here. If you are new to carburetors, I say absolutely not. Right? It could be tempting to buy a cheap carburetor because you're like, I'm going to give this carburetor thing a whirl. And you buy a cheap one just to get your feet wet. Well, this will do nothing but make you have heartache. And a lot of people are going to hate carburetors for the rest of their lives because they bought one of these things and it's a complete piece of junk. And here are some reasons why it's not going to make a good carburetor for most people. None of the jets are marked. You don't know what your starting point is. You don't have any instructions. The bleeds aren't marked. If you get into air bleed changes, which you're going to need to if you really want to make it sing, those you have to know what you're starting with because there are so many options and it's expensive to guess. The squirters aren't marked. So what's going on there is when you get a carburetor, it's got a basic one-size-fits-all calibration in it. And to make changes to that calibration, well, it's running fat. I need to go leaner. It's like, well, what's leaner? You don't know because you don't know what jet you're starting with. There's no documentation that tells you, and there's no markings on the jet itself, which would just make a nightmare. So you've saved a couple $100 buying this carburetor, but what are you going to do when you need to tune it? Are you going to go buy every single pump cam, every single air bleed, every single jet, every single adjustable component? You're going to have to go buy one. I mean, I always tell people the same thing. If you're new to carburetors in particular, don't buy a used carburetor. Don't buy somebody else's problems. Don't cheap out just to try to get going quickly, because you're going to have a learning curve ahead of you no matter what you do. And it's best to start with a fresh sheet of paper when you're doing that. Most people have enough problems as it is, and this is going to generate a bunch more. And it isn't a money saver, and it definitely isn't a time saver to get something like this going. I'm enthusiastic about carburetors. I try to help people out with get their carburetors, and I know that the people who buy this, the people who get taken by this, are going to be the ones who can least afford it. Here at Scram, we hate junk. We hate junk because we see it cause a bunch of misery. It either means that your project fails, or it means you got to come up with the money to do it twice. Neither one of those is a good answer. You save a lot of money if you just buy something good the first time from a person who knows what they're talking about. I could go on for hours picking this thing apart with just all the little stuff I've seen with it, but I hope I've made the point. So if you want something that you're going to have to completely re-engineer and you get less pieces than you would with a model kit, then go for it. But I am going to tell you I told you so if you call me and tell me about it. So keep that in mind. So anyways, that's all I've got for today. I hope you found this helpful. If you do think it'd be helpful to you to see me trying to chase this stupid thing around and make it work on my car, then yeah, please let us know in the comments. Check us out at Scram Speed if you like, if you're doing carburetors, especially if you're doing a carbureted LS or something like that. We sell all that stuff on our website. We sell a lot of stuff to make carburetors easier for people, fuel lines, that kind of thing. So if that's something you're interested in, give us a look at scramspeed.com. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Have a good day.